Our second speaker is Dr. Pinakin Karpe. Dr. Pinakin Karpe is currently working as a manager in intellectual property cell at Cipla Limited. He holds a doctorate in pharmacology and toxicology from Naipur Mohali, India. He has more than 5.5 years of experience in handling matters of IP and product portfolio management. His work mainly focused on providing accurate, quality, and time-bound IP inputs to in-house and in-licensed formulations and devices for all markets. He also manages patent portfolios by identifying inventions, drafting and filling of patent applications, and prosecution for grant of patents. He has also experience in analysis of freedom to operate reports, design around strategies, and invalidation reports. All in all, his role is helping strategize, protect, and manage, commercialize, patent, and other IP assets. So now over to you, Dr. Pinakin.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Deepak. And as for the record, as I recall, you are my super senior. I hope you remember me.
Yes, sure.
I seen you defending your PhD. I also seen Anupama ma'am and Dr. Anil Gaikwad. So three of you I know from Bates Pilani. Yeah. So let me just share the presentation. So can you see the presentation?
Yeah, no, not yet.
Yeah, yes. The present now I am getting several tabs here. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You can either go to the entire. Yeah, now it's coming. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there was some issue. Okay. So good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Indeed, this is a great pleasure talking here at this conference on regulatory aspects and intellectual property rights in pharmaceuticals. So I'll be talking about basically the interesting aspects of the Indian patents law and its impacts on the pharmaceutical generic industry. So over this last decade, there have been landmark cases in India as far as the Indian generic industry is concerned, and those cases really gave the clarity of what Indian patent law is and how it should be enacted. So it takes me to the first slide of the presentation, is that how our whole system is arranged. If you see the parliament, which is there, which makes the law, then there is the President of India, whose responsibility is to implement and enforce the law. And finally, there are courts such as District Court, High Court, and Supreme Court. The court have the responsibility to interpret what is the law. So if you see, the court has to do the balancing act on the wire to balance really the innovation versus generics. So on one side, there should not be prejudice to the patent owners. On the other side, there should not be prejudice to the public. There should be a public interest which should be preserved. So this particular thing the court do throughout the day. Now, the Indian Patent Act, which has been enacted since 1970 in India, it has been amended since then. I think 4 or 5 times it has been amended since. So the basic requirement of getting the patent, it has not changed over the years. And as we know that the getting a patent for your invention is as important as getting an invention in the first place. So there are basically three prongs of getting a patent in India or over the in the world. Is that your invention should be novel. That means it should not be anticipated by any prior art. Prior art means any publication or any knowledge in the public, or if someone is already using your invention, that falls under the definition of prior art. Now the next prong is the inventive step. So inventive step basically means is that the invention which you have come to should not be obvious to the person skilled in the art, okay, or it should have at least an economical significance. That means it should have a commercial value. Let's say, for example, any let's say any pick up any brand from any innovator. If it has commercial value, it is making money, then we can say that although there is no technical advance in it, but it is of economical significance, or it should have both. And then the last prong is that the invention should has the industrial application. So if you're synthesizing any gene or you have discovered any new receptor, we'll clap for it, but we will not, they will not grant you a patent for that because it lacks industrial application. So these are the basic three prongs to get the patent in India. Now that brings me to the very interesting part of drug life cycle, and the audience must be curious to know what are the different stages here, and on in that different stages, what actually one can patent. Okay, and there are several stages of patenting. So once you start your research, you start with the in silico techniques, and you have lots of compounds in your computer sitting there. So you try to cover those compounds using a sort of genus. Genus is, I would say, it is actually a backbone wherein you try to protect hundreds and thousands of compounds. So that's your first step, that you file a genus patent. Then when you come to know that out of those 1,000 compounds, there is one compound or there are 10 compounds which are actually looking good, and you believe that those compounds are going to get going to deliver in phase 3 or phase any phase of clinical trial, then you boil down to those 1 or 10 compounds, then you file a specific set of patents. So the genus and specific compound. So to further clarify, if you see on the right hand on the left hand side, the 147 patent, it's Indian patent numbers. So 147 patent, this is a typical claim of genus patent, wherein if you see, this is a backbone. It has 3 kind of rings, and if you see, there are groups R1, R2, R3, R4. So if you see R1, you can have a number of substitutions. R2, you can have a number of substitutions. That way you can cover a lot of compounds. Now this particular compound can also be claimed in specific manner, wherein you have some specific specific substitutions, and then you arrive at this particular compound. So this is genus patent, and this is a species patent. Okay, so this has earlier filing date, this has later filing date. All right. Now the interesting thing here is that in this patent, this particular compound may not be exemplified, because you don't know whether out of all these thousands of compound, whether this compound is active or not. Okay, and then when you realize that, then you know that yes, this is the compound, and then you file the species patent. I am focusing on this point because we have some cases here which actually focus on this particular point. So just need to be on the same page. Then comes the after your you have conceived that there is a compound which looks of interest. Then you file other patents such as polymorphs of that compound, method of treating some disease using that particular compound, or process of preparation of that compound. Then when you enter into phase 1 to phase 3, you have you come to know about the salts of that compound. For example, making a hydrochloric salt of particular compound increases the solubility, increases the absorption. then you try to file a patent for that. Then you know that, oh, the compound is not acting orally, it is acting topically, or it is acting, by inhalation route. Then you prepare a composition accordingly and you file a patent for that. Then you know the dose, strength, drug-drug interaction, and post-marketing. You can have a pediatric indication also, and other indications also which are not there in phase 1 to phase 3. So this is how the patent life cycle goes hand in hand with the drug life cycle. So if you notice here, the first patent to expire would be genus patent. Then the second patent to expire would be specific compound patent. Third patent to expire would be composition patent. And the last patent to expire would be subsequent indication patent. That's how the patent life cycle is. All right. So not going in detail with the basic categories of the patent, for example, the ordinary application, the conventional application, and PCT application. I am focusing more on the categories of patent which relate to the pharmaceuticals here. So if you see, we have just now seen the genus versus specific patent. It talks about specific API, it covers specific API. Then there are process patent, product by process patent, polymorph patent, composition patent, method of use, dosing regimen, and so on. You can file it. Before I move ahead with the cases, I would like to give you a brief idea how the patent filing and the grant works basically in India. So if you see here, there are two the timelines I have posted here. The one is the old timeline and the other one is the new timeline. If you see in old timeline, you file a patent on day 1, that is priority date. Then you have 12 months to file a complete application, to complete your idea. Then you file within 12 months the complete specification. Then you request the patent office for examination of your patent. And then patent office generally it took 5 to 8 years to get first examination report, and then you reply to that examination report, and then expect that the patent office will grant the patent based upon the invention. Now, in the new rules, what has happened is that patent office has given us the leverage of calling it as early publication. So when we file this complete specification at the 12 months, we can actually file request for early publication so that the patent office can publish my patent application early. And then after the filing of this early publication, I can file the express request for examination. So after filing this express request for examination, patent office takes up my application early as compared to ordinary application. And then I can expect the first examination report within 3 to 4 months, and perhaps the patent grant can happen within 1 to 2 years of date of filing. So that is wonderful thing which the patent office is doing. So they are really clearing the piles of the files which are lying there. Now, so if you had a chance to look at the Indian Patent Acts, there are many sections in it. It's a wonderful act. It's very nicely written. But if you just blindly read it, you won't get it. It's really dry to read. But when you read it in relation to the case laws which are there, then you will enjoy it. You will fall in love with the Patent Acts. And the one of the important sections which is exclusively in India, not anywhere in the world, is section 3. The section 3 is basically section 3D, which says that what are the inventions which are not patentable. Okay. Now in that there are many sections like section A to K, but for pharmaceuticals, the section 3D is of more importance because it says that new form of known substance cannot be patented, or a new property of a known substance cannot be patented. So let's say you have aspirin, right? And you know that aspirin is a thrombolytic agent. Now you discover in your lab that aspirin is anti-cancer too, and you want a patent for that. So patent office will deny, simply because it's not the new substance, it's the still old substance. Likewise, if you prepare a derivative of aspirin, or if you prepare a new sort of aspirin, then you may not get the patent here. But if you apply the same in US or Europe, they will award you a patent for that. That's the difference here. So if you see, our industry or our law is more towards the pro-generic as compared to pro-innovator. So the balance is still, more towards the generic. Thanks to this section 3D. And let's look at the cases now. So the section 3D was, it was not really, it was not really opened. It was not really known that how to apply section 3D, but the Novartis has really taken that job for us. And they really went ahead with Union of India and asked them, look, boss, please explain this section 3D to us, what it is exactly. So the case is that Novartis, had invented this imatinib base, okay, in 1996. But they soon discovered that imatinib base is not, active or efficacious in treating cancer. So they prepared a crystalline form and they prepare salt of imatinib, that is imatinib mesylate. So, and then they claim that imatinib mesylate is better because it has good flow property, it has better thermodynamic stability, and it is less hygroscopic than imatinib base. So they applied the patent worldwide, and they got a patent for that at US, Europe. But when they applied the same patent in India, the Indian Patent Office has rejected that patent. Novartis has applied to the IPAB, which is the upper board. They also rejected it. Then the High Court also rejected it. And then Novartis had a chance to, appeal that rejection to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, very interestingly looked at this case and they said that let's compare imatinib base versus imatinib mesylate. Under section 3D, are they same compound? The structure is different because mesylate is a ester, the imatinib is a simple base. Now the next thing is that the court said that in terms of efficacy, what data you have. So the Novartis was blank about it, and they don't have any data with respect to improved efficacy. So all they had to say was the imatinib mesylate is slightly better than the imatinib base in terms of flow properties and thermodynamic stability, but in terms of efficacy, both are equal. Okay, and the court then clarified that the burden of section 3D is that in order to get the salt patent or ester patent granted, you need to show really that your compound is efficacy is far superior in efficacy as compared to the prior art compound or the literature compound. Then only you will be able to surpass the mountain of section 3D. Otherwise, it is very difficult to get salt or ester patent in India getting granted. So this was the first case who actually told us what 3D is, and then haphazardly patent examiner started throwing this section 3D against all the patent applicants irrespective of their invention is. Now the next case which took the advantage of that Supreme Court verdict was Merck versus Glenmark. The product was sitagliptin. This product, it's used for treatment of diabetes. And if you see in 2006, Merck had approval of sitagliptin in US and in India in 2008. And now when they launched, their sale was close to or 240-250 crores because they were launching. They launched both mono as well as combination product, that is sitagliptin plus sitagliptin in combination with metformin. Now what Merck did a trick here is that they have launched this drug at much lower price than US. That point favored Merck because in India, the pricing of the drug is a very sensitive issue. The public interest is very sensitive issue. And Merck sensed that, and they launched the drug with 1/5 lower than USA. That was one point. Please make a note of that. And then Merck had also launched an access program, which helped the patient to know more about the drug. they have also facilitated the affordability, or the drug could reach to the patients, and that will really manage the diabetes well. So these 2 points Merck took care of. Now, what is the case here? That Merck had filed the 816 patent in India in 2004. The patent basically covers sitagliptin base. It did not, and it broadly covers the salts. So the claim 19 of the 816 says sitagliptin free base and its salts. Okay. Now, later on, the Merck had also filed a separate application claiming sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate. Now, at the filing of this particular patent application, Merck believed that the forming of phosphate monohydrate salt could improve the solubility or absorption characteristics of sitagliptin on the first place, but it did not, and then it voluntarily withdrawn that application in India. So this was the fact in India. But in other jurisdictions, like in Europe and US, Merck had got patent for sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate. Now, if you notice, in India, Merck had only sitagliptin base patent, whereas in US and Europe, they have 2 patents, sitagliptin base patent and sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate patent. Now, Glenmark smartly went ahead and launched the product containing sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate, because there was no patent in India claiming sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate. Now, what was Glenmark's argument here? Glenmark very nicely, and smartly tried to argue that, look, you have filed a base patent and then you unsuccessfully filed phosphate patent, but you couldn't get. That means you knew at the time of filing of these 2 patents, these 2 compounds are actually 2 different compounds. They're not the same. Had it been the same compound, you will not be filing 2 patents. Why in the first place you have filed 2 patents for that? So they took the basis of that and went to and then the Merck noticed that the Glenmark had launched those products. The Merck had actually filed a suit against Glenmark. In turn, Glenmark challenged the validity of sitagliptin base patent, and they asked for revocation of the patent. That's a different story. Now, what court had said is that although sitagliptin is basically the 816 patent covers basically broad sitagliptin and its salt, it indeed includes monophosphate also. And the court basically clarified that the Glenmark is taking advantage of section 3D, wherein it says that the new form of known substance cannot be patented, wherein you fit that criteria into getting a patent for sitagliptin monophosphate, wherein you say that sitagliptin monophosphate could not be patented because it's a new form of known substance of sitagliptin. But in US and Europe, you have 2 different patents for that. So please make clarity that these 2 are different compounds. But the court said no, these are not different compounds, because the basic active moiety or the therapeutic moiety in Januvia and Janumet, that is the Merck's product, is the sitagliptin base. And the court then asked the question whether the Glenmark product has sitagliptin base in it, although it is a this phosphate salt, but it had the base which was actually acting as an active moiety. So they fell in the claim of 816, and the court declared that no, the Glenmark infringes. Now, assume the scenario here that what if Merck was not selling Januvia at lower price? Had it selling at higher price, then the case would have been different. Or let's assume that if Merck had obtained or secured the patent for sitagliptin phosphate monohydrate, then perhaps the case would have been different here. Now, what are the takeaways of section 3D is that the court clarified specifically that you cannot basically use section 3D, as a defensive strategy in getting away with the infringement options. The strength of case also depends upon the angle, such as the price of brand versus the generic. So if the brand is priced at very at high rate or costly, then perhaps there is a good chance that generic may win, at least on the injunction side. And the case further strengthens the section 3D, and it really heightens the barrier of section 3D, so that it is very now difficult to get the patent for salt ester products and have, which don't have the superior chemical profile. Now what has happened is that this is all about API process. Now, when you file the composition patent, when you have a composition, for example, let's say you file a patent for sitagliptin having excipients such as ABC, then you file a patent application. An examiner comes with an objection of, examiner files with an objection of section 3D, and then you have no option because you cannot prove that your composition is superior in efficacy as compared to the prior art composition. Can you do that? Because you don't have that data. You have only DISO data, or you have perhaps any other data which shows that the tablet composition is better than capsule. That's how you do it, right? But after this Novartis and Glenmark case, the examiners have started citing these 3D sections haywire. All right. Now let's move to the next interesting aspect of the Indian patent law, that is Form 27, and its impacts on the coverage of the patent. Actually, it does not have any impact on the coverage of the patent, but the cases are proving otherwise. Now, what is this Form 27? This is again unique feature in Indian patent law. So as per the section 146 of Indian Patents Act, so when you file a patent and then you get a grant for that, then you're supposed to file this Form 27. Okay, after filing this Form 27, what you have to tell in Form 27 is that your invention has worked or not worked in India. What do you mean by that? So if you launched, if you file a patent for, let's say, sitagliptin, and then you have not launched your product in India, then you file a Form 27 in the patent office and you say that it is not worked. And if you launched it, you say that it is worked. And if it is worked, then you have to mention that what are the quantities of the product which you are selling in market, what are the volumes, and whether you have granted any sub-license to any other company or that. Now, what is the purpose of this? This is unique to the Indian patent system. What is the purpose of this? Now, if you see, now assume a scenario that you have a patent for your molecule, and you are not selling that product in India. Now, if I copy that molecule and I'm a third party, if I copy that molecule and I go ahead and launch that molecule in the market, because you own that patent, you have a right to come after me, assert that patent against me, and prevent me from getting into the market. But I will argue to the court that, look, this guy has a patent, but he did not launch his product in market. So there is no harm I'm causing to him by launching this product. It's theoretically true because no harm is done to you, right? So this particular thing is worked in that fashion. So with respect to compulsory license, if you see that there are 3 prongs of compulsory license. The one is that there is a reasonable requirement of the public with respect to patented invention have not been satisfied. Then the patented invention is not available to the public at reasonable affordable price, or the patented invention is not worked in the territory of India. So if the third prong, if you see here, the third prong is, if you have not filed a Form 27, then this third prong of compulsory license will be met, and someone may ask for compulsory license for your product, and you may not get the damages for that. Okay, let's move to the next slide. The next thing is next presentation. Next case is that it talks about the Natco versus AstraZeneca. That is, the product is ticagrelor, and the tablets which the AstraZeneca had launched in India are ticagrelor tablets, which are sold under the name of Brilinta in India since 2012. Now the tablet price was 50 rupees per tablet, and hold on a second. Sorry. Yeah. So here the case is that the Astra. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah. So there are two patents in this picture. Actually, basically, the first one is that this genus patent, that is IN229, which they covered basically the broad categories of compound which I explained earlier. And there is this specific patent that is 907, which specifically covers this ticagrelor. And there is third category of patent, that is polymorph patent, that is 984 patent, and the fourth category is formulation patent. Now, I want you to connect this slide to the slide in which I just shown the drug life cycle. If you see the layers of patents here, the first one is this genus patent, the second one is specific patent, the third one is polymorph patent and formulation patent. So if you see the expiry wise, this is expiring in September 29, expired. This was expired in December 29. This will expire in 21, and the formulation will expire in 27. Now what Astra has done, Astra had filed Form 27 for all the patents. Now, when you file Form 27 for all the patents, it generally means that your invention, that means ticagrelor, has been worked through all the patents, right? Through genus patent, through specific patents, through polymorph, through formulation, because all this patent relates to ticagrelor basically. Now, in the meantime, just before the expiry of the genus patent, the three companies, Natco, which is very aggressive, DRL and Micro, they have launched their product, and then Natco sued these companies in April 2018. But Astra did not sue these companies over this genus patent, which was anyways going to expire in just say 6 months. Now, what is interesting thing is that the Natco and DRL and the Micro, they have argued in a very different way. They said that, look, Astra has filed Form 27, which means that they have worked the invention through those patents. That means the genus patent, which is 229 patent, although the ticagrelor is not specifically disclosed in that specification, but it is still covered by that patent. Also the specific patent. So the Astra is not supposed to have 906, 907 patent, because you cannot have two patents for covering one compound. That's what their argument was. So if 229 was there, then why in the first place you have 907 patent, and then you are asserting 907 patent against us? Then there was some additional material facts to this particular case, that the equivalence of 907 patent, that means the specific patents, have been invalidated or knocked down in China, Europe and South Korea, and Astra had failed to mention that in Indian Patent Office. That's again unique requirement of Indian Patent Office. So when you file any patent application in India, you have to give all the details of all the equivalents in the world of that particular application to the patent office. That means you have to say to the patent office, look, I am trying to pursue the patent in India, but I have filed equivalent in US or Europe, and US has granted this patent to me, or Europe has granted this patent to me, or they have rejected. So whatever the decision may be, you need to submit those documents to the Indian Patent Office, and in this case, Astra did not do it. Now the argument was on the basis of Form 27, and then they challenged the validity of this specific patent 907 over this genus patent. They said that ticagrelor is there in the 229 patent, which was expired in September 2019, and this 907 patent should not be granted in the first place because it has the same compound in it. So what Astra argued is that mere submission of Form 27 does not mean that that there is a disclosure in the 229. That's a very unique argument they have, and it's true. And it is possible that there could be multiple patents to cover single product. So multiple patent here means that you have a product patent, you have a formulation patent, you have a polymorph patent. That's fair. But genus and species are the two different categories of the API patents. And they have submitted a testimony of Dr. Robert Riley, to argue that the ticagrelor is has greater therapeutic efficacy than the compounds which are disclosed in the genus patent. And the court bought that testimony, and court said that look, the Form 27 has been filed for both genus as well as species. That means there is something in 229 which relates to ticagrelor. Otherwise, you would have not filed the Form 27 for 229 patent. Therefore, the defendant in this case are Dr. Reddy's and NATCO. They have raised a credible challenge to the validity of 907 patent, right? And therefore, court was reluctant to grant injunction here. So that was win-win situation for these generics, because in spite of having this specific patent, the Astra was not able to prevent them from getting into the market. Right. So this was another interesting case which talks about the impact of Form 27. Now, with this case, the brands are now thinking of carefully filing Form 27 to each and every patent, whether to file Form 27 to genus patent or specific patent or polymorph or what. They need to think twice on that. And the last pending issue is with respect to here is that the double patenting of the species patent over the genus patent. Now, the same thing is that if you have a genus patent in space, can you argue to the court that one cannot have a species patent because it's a double patenting? Double patenting means that you have a patent for A, and then you again go to the court and say, I want another patent for compound A. So that's not possible. This was the case, and this scenario was cleared in this recently in the product called dapagliflozin, which really went into the market right now. The Astra markets the dapagliflozin, that is Farxiga, for treatment of type 2 diabetes. Now, if you see here also there are two patents, genus patent and the specific patent. The left one is genus, the right one is specific. Now, what defendant had argued that the genus patent has already been expired. Now they have launched after the genus patent has expired. And they said that the Astra cannot have 625 patent because it claims specifically dapagliflozin in the first place. And if the patent office has granted the 625 patent, it is actually an act of evergreening. So you are actually extending the monopoly. So you should have been capped at 2020, but you have got extra additional 3 years, that is 2023, for the same product, that is dapagliflozin. And that's how they challenge that this cannot be done because this is the double patenting. Now, what they have specifically pointed is that Astra has filed 2 separate applications in US, one for genus patent, one for specific patent in US. Now, when they filed the application for genus patent, they got patent which was expired in 2020, and when they filed separate patent for this dapagliflozin, the patent office said that the 625 cannot be granted because it has the same product. Therefore, the Astra had surrendered the expiry of 625 to 2020. So they have taken this basis and they said that in India also, Astra cannot have the extra 3 years here because they should be capped at 2020 because it's the same compound which is getting patented through both the patents. Then the court looked at those, the statements which the Astra had made in the US litigations. US litigation in the sense that the dapagliflozin is Astra is selling in US also, in India also. In US, there are many companies who tried to file ANDA for that. One of the companies, Zydus. So the Astra asserted the genus patent over Zydus, but not the specific patents. Then the court also compared the specification of the two patent genus versus the specific, and they found that there is no actually technical advance. Both the compounds are same in terms of efficacy, and therefore the court really, denied the injunction. Although the case is not over, they just denied the injunction. That means the generics are free to go into the market. They just need to maintain the track record of their sales, and that's how it is. It's another interesting case. So in summary, I would say that court throughout these cases have clarified that the section 3D should not be used as the defense to non-infringement, which we have seen in Merck versus Glenmark or the other cases. And then it is challenging. It is becoming challenging for the brand to select against which patent I should put down Form 27, through which patent I should say that this is worked, this is not worked. Similarly, the court now looking these things, the genus versus specific patents in serious manner, and they are now thinking of it's like you won't have genus patent in India at all, or if it is there, you won't be able to assert it because unless you have a specific disclosure of the compound, you won't be able to assert the patents against the third party. So the battle is still continuing. And throughout all the cases, we have seen that the generic companies have taken public interest into the case, and when the public interest grows, the courts are likely to grant decision in favor of the generic companies. The other thing is that now we have reached to the product patents, for example, genus patent and specific patent, but actually, we have not contested the polymorph patent or formulation patent. If you see, we are not fighting on the merits as of now. We are just fighting on the laws. How should they be construed? But we are not actually comparing the product versus claim. So that has to be happened. So let's say if there is a polymorph patent which covers the form 1 of compound X and having certain XRD, right? And you, as a generic, you go ahead with a different form, let's say form 2 with a different XRD, then how court is going to look at that? That guidance is still missing. On the same formulation front, if you have a formulation, a brand having a patent, formulation patent having, let's say, compound X and excipient ABC, and you develop your product with, say, formulation having a different compound, let's say EBX, then how you're going to come out of that patent? If you don't literally infringe, then how you will come out of the claim? That has not been contested yet. So many more cases to come in this aspect. So I hope I made justice here by pointing out some of the interesting landmark cases which will ignite the interest in the audience with respect to IP. Because if you read IP, it's very interesting. It's a exciting world out there. And thank you very much. I will answer the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Pinakin. Now, anybody can ask, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead. So Dr. Pinakin,
Yeah.
yeah, this is really a very interesting talk, and I really enjoyed it. I have few queries. I mean, patenting is a very gray area for me. You can say there are many things still to look into, and being an expert or in this field. Like when we talk about this section D, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned that source forms and others are not patentable in India, but we can go for the patenting outside, maybe in US, Europe there. So if you are making the esters of the drugs, the drug is already off patent, and then we are just making esters which may have improved efficacy.
Right.
So is that patentable in India?
Yeah. So if you show to the patent office that through any animal study or any in vivo human study that ester is more efficacious in as compared to the previous compound, then perhaps you could get a patent for that. But that is very higher burden. You cannot each and every time embark on a journey of showing efficacy, because it's very costly affair.
Yes.
It's not that everyone can have it. Right.
Okay. And you have also shown the cases for the invalidation part where some case studies are there. So apart from those, what could be the other reasons for the invalidation in a patent, that anybody can challenge that the patent is invalid and now they can exercise that?
Okay. So this is good question, because I did not deliberately dwell into details of that, because it's very vast scenario. So if when you file a patent, you have very different stages. You can oppose that patent. So when the patent is at the application stage, you can file a pre-grant opposition. When it is granted, you file a post-grant opposition within 1 year of the grant. And if that timeline has passed, then you can challenge that patent in the court. That's revocation proceedings. Now there are various grounds for the challenging of the patent. Now the first ground is that you say to the court that this is not novel concept. This was already known to the public, or this was already disclosed in the prior art. Or you could say that although it is not known or not disclosed in the prior art, if I combine, let's say, prior art 1 with the prior art 2 with the prior art 3, I can easily come down to the invention. So that's not obvious at all. Okay, these are the two basic grounds through which you can argue. There are other grounds. For example, you can find a lacuna wherein you would say that, look, let's take an example of abyss deterrence. So let's say the patent is claiming abyss deterrent technology, and you have found that the applicant has not clarified in the specification what abyss deterrent technology is and how it is working. Then perhaps you could prove to the patent office that yeah, the claims are there, but the person skilled in the art would not make from reading the patent specification how to make an invention. If I am not able to make an invention by reading the patent specification, the patent should not have been granted. So this is another way of getting it. There are many other ways.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Pinakin, for providing insights into the patenting and taking up a lot of case studies that are really very interesting. So thank you for your talk.